So today I'll be focusing on the constitutional struggles in China. Um, for those who are not familiar with Chinese history of legal system and constitution in 2000, in 1908, um, China, the Qing dynasty had the first constitution in China, and then there were 13 constitutions before the establishment of People's Republic of China in 1949. And this is the 1908, the first Chinese constitution. And after 1949, there were four um, constitutions, and the current constitution was enacted in 1982, and there were five amendments in 1988, 97, and 99. So there were amendments about economic reforms and about ideology, political ideology. Um, and then in 2004, significantly, the human rights protection was written into the Constitution. And then a few years ago in 2018, Xi Jinping removed the presidential term limit from the Constitution, and there were some other changes in the wording of our Constitution, strengthening the Communist Party's leadership. And it also created the National Supervisory Commission. And in China, there are two constitutions. One is the constitution we are talking about now, and another is the constitution of the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP constitution. And so there are several party constitutions, and then the current party constitution was enacted in also in 1982, and there were amendments almost every 5 years. The Communist Party changed its party constitution, um, and there are debates about uh, is China a totalitarian system or authoritarian system? Um, if we look into the classic definition of totalitarianism, um, we can conclude that the current system in China is much more totalitarian than authoritarian system in terms of the one-party rule, and the Communist Party controls the Congress, the military, the press, and the propaganda, and also the pervasive use of secret police. And there are two major differences between authoritarianism and totalitarianism. The first one is the rule of political ideology, whether or not there's uh, ruling, guiding ideology. And the second difference is whether or not that political system controls or interferes political the private sphere. Um, and so we can see that to a great extent, the political system in China is very much totalitarian. And what should be noticed is that the Chinese Communist Party has been using high technology to strengthen its control on the society and individuals. So I coined the term high-tech totalitarianism to describe this unprecedented total control, total surveillance system. And the legal and political system in China is settled by the totalitarian tradition after 1949. So a brief review of the legal development, like in after the establishment of the People's Republic of China, it's ruled by Mao Zedong, um, and especially the Cultural Revolution between 1966 and 1976, and it was um, humanitarian disaster. It's a total arbitrariness and the lawlessness. And then the Constitution was passed in 1982. And then there was a democracy movement in 1989. And sadly, it was crushed by the Tiananmen massacre. Um, and the Communist Party adopted market economy, the socialist market economy in mid 1990s, and internet was also introduced into China in 1994, and China was engaged in global economy. In 2001, China was allowed to enter the World Trade Organization, and then there was new discourse of rule by law. It's not rule of law, but it's still a progress compared to the Mao Zedong era. In theory, the Constitution is, of course, the supreme law. And under the Constitution, there are national laws, administrative regulations, and the local regulations. But in practice, um, the Constitution in China doesn't matter. It's like a reversal authority. If we talk about individual case, if we look at the daily legal practice or how things are governed in China, what most important is not the constitution, but the personalized power or the red tapes, the documents, the regulation by the Communist Party, and then the local rules. So the county, the city regulations are more important than the provincial and the central government's regulations. Uh, these are photos of 红头文件, the red tapes. Sometimes it's like a formal regulation by the state council or the Communist Party or local government. Sometimes it's about trivial stuff in really low-level government. Mm. And there are at least two intrinsic contradictions in Chinese constitution. The first one is the Chinese constitution is not judicialized, and there are regulations by the Supreme Court that judges cannot invoke the constitution when dealing with a criminal case or civil case or other cases. So the Constitution is not invocable. And then the lack of a constitutional review system. If you violate the criminal law, and then of course there are police, prosecutors, and judges. But if a government or the authorities, kind of authority, violates the constitution, there is no remedy. There's no constitutional court or constitutional committee. And we'll talk about the Sun Zhigang case and the Qi Yulin case later. And then the second intrinsic contradiction of Chinese Constitution is that there there are a lot of beautiful articles in the Constitution regarding the protection of human rights. Actually, the whole chapter 2 of the Constitution articulates the all these fundamental freedoms and human rights, like right to vote, freedom of speech, religious freedom, property rights. But these kind of human rights cannot be meaningfully protected under the political frame set up in the constitutional preamble and other chapters. It in the preamble and the main text, it emphasized the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party, and there's no judicial independence, there's no separation of powers, and the ideology, the official ideology is Marxism, Maoism, and the Xi Jinping thoughts. And it's also dictatorship. So literally, democratic dictatorship. It's not a liberal democracy. Um, and these kind of intrinsic contradictions came from another more fundamental item, which is the purpose of the Chinese Constitution is to ensure the power monopoly of the Chinese Communist Party. It's not to protect people's rights and freedom. So that's so the China is a party state, and the party um, made the Chinese constitution in order to maintain its leadership of the Communist Party. Um, so we have to understand the party state system to understand the Chinese law and constitution and politics. Here I drew a diagram of the party state, how it functions in China. So the red part refer to the Communist Party, and the brown part refers to the state system. And we can see the Communist Party and its hierarchical. When we talk about how the Chinese Communist Party impacts the Chinese politics, we are not talking about 90 million party members. We are talking about the party congress, the central committee, the Politburo, and then seven standing members of the Politburo. And then on the top of the party, it's the general secretary. Now his name is Xi Jinping. So it's a single party, and then Xi Jinping or the standing members of the Politburo rule China. They have the biggest power, and then the Communist Party has several branches like a Department of Propaganda and Political Legal Committee and other committees. And then take the Political Legal Committee as an example. It controls or dictates the Ministry of Justice, the Ministry of Public Security, and the Ministry of State Security, and also the Supreme People's Court, the Supreme Procurate. The In the state system, we have these ministries and departments, but in in the Ministry of Public Security, there's a party branch, and the party branch controls the ministry, the whole ministry. So it's kind of the party controls all the different departments, and then there is a party branch in every every department. Um, and sometimes they like the supervisory committee. It's part of the party, and it's also part of the state. And it's so that's a perfect example of a party state. Mm. There are interesting discussions about whether or not the concept of a dual state is applicable to China. The dual state is a book written by Ernst Frankl. So he described the Nazi Germany's system like the two parallel orders coexist, the normative state and the prerogative state. Um, and if it's about a political issue, and then the prerogative state prevails, and it's subject to the arbitrariness, not the rule of law, not the legal system. But in China, I think there is more arbitrariness than in Nazi Germany in terms of the legal and political practice. So I think the concept of party state is more explanatory than dual state. So with that, why does the Chinese government maintain a constitution that it doesn't follow, it doesn't want to follow? There are some uh, concepts like symbolic legitimacy, and in the constitution, it emphasizes the leadership of the Communist Party. Um, and the Communist Party really wants the discursive legitimacy um, by the Constitution, and they can tell the Chinese people, they can tell the international community that we have a Constitution, and we have all those kind of freedoms and human rights in the Constitution, and that's our commitment. We will keep our promise. We'll protect people's free speech, kind of that. But actually, they don't respect the Constitution. They don't. The Chinese people don't have freedom of expression and religious freedom, and they don't have a right to vote. Um, but this kind of constitution also provides discursive power or symbolic legitimacy for the civil society. So discursive power can be in different directions. And the human rights movement, in China we call it the rights defense movement, is an example to show that how the human rights lawyers and pro-democracy intellectuals, human rights defenders in China use the constitution to defend people's rights, to strengthen the power of the society. I've written several papers about the rise and the fall of the rights defense movement. So the group of human rights lawyers and activists really promoted like legal progress in China after 2003, early 2000. Mm, I'll give more examples of the rights defense movement. And in terms of the Chinese Constitution as a battlefield, yeah, we have mentioned that the Chinese Constitution is is not invocable. The Chinese judges are prohibited from invoking the Constitution. But in 2001, there was an influential case, the Qiyulin case. The judge in that case really set the constitution and saying that the Chinese people have the right to education, and so that case was called like China's Marbury versus Madison. It's interesting. It's not a huge case, but it has significant meaning in terms of constitutional development. And this case is much more influential. In 2003, a designer named Sun Zigang was taken into the custody and repatriation center um, by the local police in Guangzhou City. So there was there was a regulation about the custody and repatriation system, and then Sun Zigang was detained, and then he was beaten to death 3 days after he was detained. And this case was reported by forefront media in Guangdong province, and it aroused a national anger and debate. So people were talking about the Chinese constitution and human rights violations on social media as well as official media. And then three law scholars, including me, Dr. Xu Zhiyong and Yu Jiang, wrote an open letter to the National Congress to challenge the constitutionality of custody and repatriation system. And so we want to give pressure to the central government to abolish that apparently unconstitutional regulation, and we want to use that case to push forward constitutional review system in China. Um, so the central government abolished the custody and repatriation system a few months after we publicized our open letter. Um, and they didn't do anything to initiate the constitutional review system. They did they did establish the office to take petitions or letters of unconstitutional regulations, and so people can write to them, but they don't have any process, any procedure to review unconstitutional laws or unconstitutional regulations. Another case in Henan province is Henan Sea's case. So a judge in Henan announced that a provision of a local regulation was invalid because it's in conflict with the national seed law. Mm. And Dr. Liu Xiaobo initiated the Charter 08 um, in 2008, for which he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. And in the beginning, 303 intellectuals, including famous professors, writers, and lawyers, signed the Charter 08. It's a huge effort in the civil society to promote constitutionalism and democracy in China. Mm, and a lot of courageous Chinese activists and dissidents try to organize oppositional parties. You know, China is a single party system, and all political organizations, political parties are strictly prohibited. But like in 1992, Hu Shigen organized the Chinese Liberal Democracy Party, and then 1988, Qin Yongmin and Xu Wenli and other dissidents tried to register their Chinese Democracy Party, and many of Chinese citizens were put into prison, and many of them were sentenced to 10 plus years. Mm, and in 2013, so this lady in the third photo organized the Supreme Constitution Party. It's like a pro 波起来 pro 毛泽东 party, but their name is a Supreme Constitution Party. It's interesting, and she was also convicted, sentenced to 3 years. Tsinghua University professor Xu Zhangrun, prominent law professor, publicly criticized Xi Jinping, especially he removed the presidential term limit in from the Constitution. So a few months after that constitutional amendment was enacted, um, Xu Zhangrun published his article, and then he was later um, expelled from the university and under strict surveillance till today. So I can give you an example of how the citizens, how the human rights defenders and lawyers to challenge uh, like the Constitution article that challenges the freeze of Constitution articles. I call it activate Constitution. The Article 35 in the Constitution is about free speech and the freedom of assembly and demonstration. But there's a provincial level regulations and the state the laws made by the state council, the executive branch, to limit the free speech, and so it requires the people to apply for a permit when they want to organize any assembly or demonstration. And then there are more strict rules in the provincial level and city level. And in practice, the uh, the police, the local police, never give any permission. They never approve any application for assembly or demonstration. So we can see how a constitutional right, constitutional freedom is killed in this process. And then in 2004, I organized open letter call for the the constitutional review of these local regulations, and we want a meaningful protection of freedom of assembly. Um, And so there are constitutional entrepreneurs in China, that people like Xu Zhiyong, a leading human rights lawyer who is still in prison. We challenge the constitutionality of many systems and regulations, and but on the other hand, a scholar like Gong Xiantian, like a Marxist and a pro-government scholar, they also use the constitutional articles about property law to prevent the reforms, the economic reforms. And Yao Lifa and Xu Jun and other activists, they participate in the local election. Um, as independent candidates. So we can so the first picture is like a house church. People are protesting against the removal of Christian that church cross, and and they also quote the Constitution of religious freedom, and then the pictures, um, the pictures under that is the people who suffered from the forced eviction also raised the banners mm, of Constitution to protect their own land and houses. Um, but and then the second one is Qin Gang, the speak person in Chinese Foreign Affairs Ministry. Um, he's talking about constitution, and then the December 4th is the Constitutional Day, and there are a lot of propaganda events organized by the Communist Party. Mm. So we can see both the civil society, the human rights lawyers, and the government officials, the Communist Party, use the Constitution as a battlefield to achieve their political goals. And yeah, so the there's a long way for China to achieve its constitutionalism, um, and it's not an easy task, but we have seen the effort, the unstoppable effort by the lawyers, by the scholars, by the non-governmental organizations, and I think we uh, the civil society in China is now facing immense difficulties. It's it's very risky to continue their human rights activism, and we do need support from the international community. And I believe Chinese people will sooner or later enjoy liberal democracy. Thank you very much.